When a young person suicides while in the care of the state, we have to ask who is responsible for the death. In the case of a 15-year-old Aboriginal youth, it was those who were assigned to look after him. He was detained at a youth detention facility who regretfully have a reputation of failing Western Australian youth. As the death of Cleveland was being reported, the government chose to justify their response, but it has been revealed that they lied. Protecting themselves was more important than the truth. Protecting themselves was more important than preserving the dignity of the youth. After all, telling the truth is dignifying, a concept lost on government officials who wish to protect their poor decision-making and their really shitty behaviour. Cleveland was viewed by those responsible for him as an Indigenous kid, for which they held little hope, and as a result, they didn't value his life. This is evident by the conversation he had with staff where he told them he was planning to kill himself and what method he was going to use. We are taught in suicide prevention to discuss with a person the means they wish to use to end their lives and evaluate whether they have the means to do so. Based on that information, protective measures normally are taken. In Cleveland's case, his life wasn't viewed as valuable enough for staff to take the most basic actions which could have saved his life. I'm going to review now a report on the ABC website which talks about this particular case and particularly some of the issues that were confronted by the government and how they chose to respond to them. So, interestingly enough, this starts with an avoidable tragedy. Cleveland Dodd threatened to kill himself in his cell. Almost 15 minutes later, he was found unresponsive. The issue here that is the government had responded, or the people working there, the staff, had responded appropriately immediately, his life would have been saved. This is a bleak story of how multiple opportunities to save his life in the months, weeks and minutes leading up to his suicide were all missed. Now, this is talking about self-harm, and I do suggest that if people have issues around this, that they call Lifeline and have a conversation with a counsellor. In the minutes before 16-year-old Cleveland Dodd tried to end his life, he gave officers an unmistakable clear warning. And this is what I was saying before. We all know, those of us who are social workers or counsellors who work with youth, that the response needs to be immediate if you know how they're going to commit the suicide or at least attempt to end their lives, and what response do you need to do in terms of how they plan to do that. He said simply to them, "I'm hanging myself." In response, an officer says he'll send someone. So rather than going and seeing them straight away, he decides he then has to contact someone and get them to attend. Another officer who happens to be conducting routine checks in the wing speaks briefly with him through his cell door before moving to... So he just dismisses him, basically, and the conversation lasts 20 seconds. So instead of going in and having a conversation with him about what was happening, they just dismissed it and moved on because basically at the end of the day, they didn't care. Cleveland then gives officers a second, even clearer warning through the intercom. He tells him he's going to hang himself from a ceiling vent in his cell. The officer listening tells him not to say those things. So just don't talk about it because I'm not going to take you seriously and I don't care what you do anyway. So go ahead with it, basically. Almost 30 minutes elapsed before the first officer, the one passing by Cleveland's cell, notices him hanging. This is a disgusting story, primarily because we could have saved this kid's life, and then there's a whole host of the family members and so on, who of course are going through their own grief in relation to this. But the problem here is that the department, the government, didn't take any responsibility for actually what was happening. So he died in hospital after his life support was switched off, a week after the fatal night. He's the first child to die in detention in WA in recorded history. And the important thing here is that it could have been avoided. It could have been avoided. There's now becoming a more clearer picture because of the reporting from the ABC as to actually what happened. The Western Australian government has refused to detail what it knows about the circumstances surrounding Cleveland's death, repeating questions about exactly what happened and when have been deflected and gone largely unanswered. But the ABC has obtained access to information and cited documents which give the clearest insight yet into the chronology of catastrophe that unfolded with regard to Cleveland's death. CCT was coverage, so all the cells have CCTV coverage. This particular cell that Cleveland was in also he'd put something over the top of the television, over the camera, which would have been an indicator in itself that something was likely to happen, but no one bothered to go in and clear it or have a conversation with him even as to why he did that. So there was a crucial 16-minute period addressing the media just hours after Cleveland was rushed to hospital in a critical condition. Correctional Service Minister Paul Papalia said it was only a matter of minutes from when the team contacted officers to when he was found unconscious. It wasn't. It was actually 16 minutes that had elapsed in this particular time. There were a series of suicide threats as well that had been made, and these also were not recorded. So again, this is my whole issue here, is that they've been denying this child's particular rights in terms of being heard, in terms of understanding actually what was happening to him, and taking his suicide threats seriously, because it was obvious that they weren't doing that. Right, so that's the other issue. There wasn't a radio. So the time that it took to get back to the manager, whoever it was, and then make a decision about who was going to go and attend to Cleveland, that took a few minutes to be able to do that. They didn't have radios, so they could radio to somebody and ask them what the response should be. Or ask for a code red or whatever it is. So I guess my point here is that this was a death that should not have happened, that someone is responsible for what had happened because of the poor decision making that they made from the very moment that Cleveland told them he was going to suicide, and they chose to do nothing. And my argument here is that they choose to do nothing because they fail to value the life of Indigenous kids, youth in general, but particularly Indigenous kids. And I personally find it's atrocious. If you've got any comment to make about anything that I've said today, youth suicide, how we can deal with this issue better, please make a comment below and let me know what you think. I'll be most interested. And please subscribe also to my channel. That would be really helpful. Take care, everybody. Look after yourselves and be safe.